All right, so I'm going to be presenting on Wrap 2, which is crack repair by gravity feed with resin. So similar to what Ben previously presented on as far as crack repair by epoxy injection, the big difference is pressure. This is very similar, but when you're doing crack injection, you're using much higher pressure. Here, we're just using gravity, right? We're just going to allow gravity pressure to take the resin down into the cracks and make the repair. All right, so this document follows the same format as most of the other WRAP documents: introduction, purpose, when to use, proper preparation, selecting materials, equipment, safety, repair procedure, evaluation, etc. So it follows that same format. This document also has a hyperlink to where you can watch the previously recorded video of this presentation of the document. So that's an added feature to the document, and some of the other WRAP documents have the same feature as well. So it's really important to understand what caused the crack. So there's an assessment component to this document where the engineer, the design professional, contractor is advised to understand what caused their cracks. And there's a lot of different reasons for cracks, right? And the intent here is to make sure that the repair that you're selecting is the appropriate one based on the reason for your particular crack. So that's an important point there. So the purpose of the repair, just like epoxy injection, we're hoping for, striving for some structural integrity. We want to get a structural fill to these cracks. We want to be able to resist moisture penetration, seal the cracks up, keep moisture from getting in. The document says, use the terms polymer plug to seal these cracks, right, from harmful contaminants like chlorides, carbon dioxide, sulfates, things that can cause further deterioration, but also cause corrosion of our reinforcing steel. So that's really what we're trying to do by sealing up these cracks. And we also want to reduce any further and future and further deterioration, like from freeze-thaw damage, right? So if you're in a cold environment and water is getting in to your cracks on a surface and it freezes and thaws, you're going to get expansion of that concrete, rupturing of the concrete, causing more damage and more infiltration of those harmful contaminants. So we want to mitigate that by sealing up the cracks. So when do we use this gravity feed method? So it's important to understand that because it's gravity feed, we're just relying on gravity. So that limits us to horizontal applications. This is not a method you're going to use for a vertical crack or overhead, unless you do it from the top side and allow it to come down. And then there's two different types of cracks that we see with this repair method. First is if you had large horizontal cracks that are non-moving, then you can treat those cracks individually. You can, just address it by itself. Or if you had widespread cracks, so cracks that are all over the surface, covering a larger surface area, now we can treat those cracks. We typically would call that more of a flood coat method or a healer-sealer method. So we're going to spread the resin out over a larger area, treating all the cracks, and in that process, we're going to end up sealing the surface. So we use this term called healer-sealer. So two of the big markets where we use this method a lot, because it's horizontal, is parking garages and bridge decks. This is where we see this repair technique used quite a bit. Just wanted to show you some example of these types of typical horizontal cracks, right? As Ben pointed out, a lot of these cracks are formed from restrained shrinkage. So as concrete dries, it's restrained, and we get cracks from that process. We also get it in a plastic mode too, right? We get plastic drying shrinkage, right? So right when the concrete's finished, it's in that, just after it's finished, it's starting to dry out, that bleed water's coming up, and maybe it's evaporating too quickly, and you end up with plastic drying shrinkage cracks. And they can take different forms. You can see here that photo on your right. That is a classic example of plastic drying shrinkage cracks, typically from wind, where you have a lot of wind coming over the surface. Now, normally those types of cracks are superficial. They stay right up at the surface, but they can propagate. They can get down to the reinforcing steel. And if you're allowing these contaminants to come in, water, chlorides, and carbon dioxide, you're going to get a corrosion of your reinforcing steel. But sometimes you do get cracks that are individual. They're just linear. They're caused from restrained shrinkage, drying shrinkage, and you can treat those individually as well. So proper surface preparation. So for individual cracks, we're going to just use a wire brush, and we want to clean over the surface of the crack, very similar to the epoxy injection process. You can also use a wire wheel for that. And again, you're just trying to clean right over and prepare directly over the surface of the crack. You can use a grinder in this case. Keep in mind that may generate dust that's going to fill up the crack. And in that case, you're going to use high-pressure compressed air to clean out the crack, make sure that it's oil-free. You can also vacuum clean the crack as well. And you can also use power washing, right? Go with a power washer. However, you have to allow about 24 hours for that concrete to dry out. It may take longer than that, right? Depending on the depth of the cracks and your environmental conditions. If you do introduce water to clean the cracks, make sure that the resin you're using is moisture tolerant, because you may end up with moisture down inside the crack, further down, that isn't going to evaporate in time. And so you want to make sure that that resin is moisture tolerant. When you're doing a larger surface area, what you're striving for there is a concrete surface profile. We call that CSP. That comes from ICRI guidelines. And you're looking for about 2 to 5. So I would characterize that as an open texture surface, right? Not a rough profile surface. So you're just trying to open up the texture of the surface, and that's sufficient. That's going to require some sort of sandblasting or shot blasting. Sandblasting, you have to be careful with certain municipals. They may not allow sandblasting, right? You're gonna have airborne particulates, and that could be a problem. Shot blasting is a lot more preferred because it does have a vacuum component that pulls in the airborne debris. And you can also V-notch these cracks too, which provides kind of an in-place reservoir where you can contain the resin, and it makes it easier to pour it into the cracks to get better penetration. So just showing you some of the equipment here. Again, individual cracks going to require different equipment. You can see that crack chaser there. That's the device, walk-behind device that in red. That's a crack chaser. That's another equipment that can be used. And then the large area, that's the equipment there, that's a shot blaster. And it comes with a vacuum attachment and again pulls in the debris. So 2 common resins that are used. So when we're talking about selecting the correct materials, 2 most common materials for this application are epoxies and high molecular weight methacrylates. Those are the 2 main epoxies. They have similar characteristics, but there are some differences. Epoxies are moisture tolerant. They're a little bit more moisture tolerant than methacrylates, and they're safer to mix and apply than methacrylates. Whereas methacrylates typically have lower viscosities and lower surface tension, so you get better penetration. So that question about, getting into smaller cracks, methacrylates are going to do a much better job, especially with just gravity pressure. However, you have to be careful. There's some hazards when you talk about mixing methacrylates. And just to give you an idea of some of the viscosity requirements, typically for this application, you're looking for a resin that's going to be around less than 200 centipoise, right? And epoxies can go down 100 or less, whereas methacrylates can be 50 or less in terms of viscosity. And we have some projects where we've done successfully completed where we're around 6,000 inches in terms of width, crack width, where we found and documented epoxies and resins being applied, successfully being applied. Okay, so again, different properties. These are the two main resins that are used for this application, but the commonality here is they're both resins, low viscosity, and they're easy to pour in a horizontal application. This standard was mentioned earlier, ASTM C881, and this is a really good standard, particularly for epoxy resins. It classifies epoxy resins based on type, grade, and class, and so this really is a helpful tool when you're talking about selecting the correct materials for this type of application. So proper equipment for small to mid-sized projects, let's say up to 10,000 square feet, you're going to need the standard equipment, right? Mixing buckets, drills, mixing paddles, squeegees, flat squeegees, brooms, rollers. Those help us to push and move the material into the cracks. But some other unique equipment you might need, small cans, squeeze bottles, or even cartridges to help pour the material into individual cracks. As you get into larger projects, still going to need the standard equipment, but you may want to consider getting the material in more bulk quantity, like 55-gallon drums or totes, and maybe using like a spray bar, attached at the end of a truck to help dispense the material and give you some output on a large project. Some safety considerations. As Ben pointed out, one of the biggest tools you can have for safety is your SDS sheet, right? And making sure you read it and making sure you understand all the personal protective equipment or PPE that's needed to use that particular resin. Eyewear, rubber gloves, protective clothing, right? A lot of these resins are sensitizers. They're considered sensitizers. So that means that your contact with them can create different reactions. And everybody's going to react differently to certain sensitizers. But the point is you want to limit contact, physical contact with these materials. So you really don't want them on your skin. You really don't want them on your body. You want to limit that contact. So it's very important to read your SDS and have the right equipment for your people. There's a special note that the document provides for when you're using high molecular weight methacrylates. Typically, there are three component material. You have a monomer or a base resin, you have a promoter, and then an initiator. And you can't just mix them all together. You have to make sure that the initiator and the promoter are not mixed together. You'll end up with a violent combustible reaction. And that's not something that anybody wants on their project. So what you have to do is you have to pre-dilute the promoter with the monomer or the base resin. And then after that, then you can add the initiator to the rest of the material. So all of that has to be kept straight. So before you get going on a project, you want to have a pre-construction meeting where you have all the stakeholders at that meeting. And then you may want to have a follow-up meeting make sure that the contractor has a follow-up meeting with their crew to make sure everybody's on the same page with what needs to get done, how we're going to get it done. And if you think about these types of projects, right, bridge decks, parking garages, it's a very hazardous environment, right? A bridge deck, you've got active traffic on an adjacent lane, right? Where are we going to store the material? How are we going to get the material here? How are we going to mix it? And a lot of times that work's done at night. So a lot of these safety concerns need to be worked out in a pre-construction meeting or a pre-job meeting. So the repair process, we're going to mix the resin according to the manufacturer on their data sheet. We're going to use the right mixing paddle, mix it for the right time, right? Here's an example of a mixing paddle. This is known as a jiffy mixer. And again, a lot of these resins, you have to mix them for a certain amount of time. Then once it's properly mixed, we're going to pour the resin out. You can use sealant on either side of the crack if you're treating the crack individually, and that provides another way to provide a reservoir and just contain the resin directly over the crack. If we're going to flood coat it, we want to apply the resin evenly and pour it out over the whole area, and we're going to use flat squeegees, brooms, and rollers to get it into the crack. So here's an example of that. Guys are using squeegees. They've poured the material out, and they're using flat squeegees to get it dispensed over that surface. Then we're going to inspect the filling. We're looking for things like air bubbles, dry spots, just to show that we're getting penetration into the crack and into the concrete surface. And then we're going to allow some time, right? 20, 30 minutes for that material to start to penetrate. We're going to remove any excess resin with flat squeegees, and then we're going to apply some sand on top of it. And what this does, it gives us a non-slip surface, and it also helps with adhesion of subsequent coatings that we might put over that surface. Once that's all done, then we come back and we finish everything smooth, and we remove the sealant and any excess polymer if that's required. And then finally, how do we check the repair? So a couple ways. One is we can do test cores, very similar to the epoxy injection process. We take a core, we can look at that core. One way to help with that visual is to use a black light, and this shows us clearly where the resin has been, how deep it's traveled. And then we can also do some mechanical testing where we cast specimens and samples of the resin, and then we do some testing, mechanical tests like compressive tests, maybe splitting tensile tests, things like that. Just want to show you some of the sources for the document, and then I'll open it up to any questions.